So we're so happy today to provide an update on the early childhood agenda. I am going to turn things over to my colleague, who does have a new title. We should acknowledge this as we're recording, Marissa. Marissa is now our Director of Policy. We're so happy to have her, in this role. She's been doing this work for over 3 years with us, and we're so happy to have her on our team. So Marissa, I will turn things over to you.
Thanks, Amy. All right, so I'm going to pull up some slides and we can get into the early childhood agenda. All right.
You're getting a security alert, Mar.
Is it gone now?
Yeah, you're great.
All right, so we are here today to talk a little bit about the early childhood agenda and give the 930 callers an update, but also to, I think, make the connection that for us has become a little bit more explicit as we've continued to plan this over the past 2 months. The connection between the 930 call and the early childhood agenda, both in how the 930 call has informed the design of the agenda and also how we hope these two things work together moving forward. So I'll start by doing a little bit sort of looking back. We know there are new callers on the 930 call every day, so want to make sure that we're all starting from the same place. So giving a little bit of context about what the early childhood agenda is. And then I'll make sure our team puts the video in the chat from the release of the agenda at the State House in January. And then we'll talk a little bit about sort of looking forward, what we're planning next, and how you all can get involved, which more information on that will be coming in the next few weeks. So to start, I think the story really begins in the early days of the pandemic when I joined the Strategies for Children team. And the first few calls we had on the 930 call, we started to see, I think partially because it was a pandemic, but there was so many cross-sector partnerships that maybe hadn't been as explicit before in the past. So we were talking about food insecurity, and we heard from lawyers and HR representatives and Children's Trust, various, the Mass PPD Fund that was talking about postpartum depression and Children's Mental Health Campaign. There were all of these issue areas that we heard from you all on the 930 call that you wanted to learn more about, you wanted to hear an update from. And for our team to reflect on that and to think about how we could make some of these cross-sector partnerships a little bit more intentional, and how the pandemic sort of provided us all an opportunity to change our habits. It changed sort of our day-to-day work. And I think we all sort of looked up and looked around in a more intentional way. So at the same time, Strategies for Children was going through an internal sort of strategic planning refresh process. And based on conversations that were happening on the 930 call and based on conversations that we were having with our consultant, really wanted to lean into this role as a convener and as a connector in the state of Massachusetts. So wanted to design a structure for something where we could bring together different issue areas, different sort of sectors in early childhood that are all focusing on young children and their families and the workforce, but that may have different direct work. And that is how the idea for the early childhood agenda really began, that we know that children's issues are all connected and they're interdependent. And as Amy often says on the 930 call, families don't live in silos that we put them in. And we wanted to have a space for all of these different organizations to come together and to share updates, to be able to connect each other with each other's work, but also to develop a prioritized list of agenda items for the next 2 years. So to go through a consensus building process together and to end up with what the agenda currently is, which is 10 priorities for the early childhood field to really focus on for the next 2 years. To share a little bit about how the early childhood agenda is structured, I wanted to just call on sort of these 5 different items. So the first is culture of continuous improvement. And I think it's very much how we've structured the 930 call. It is also how the early childhood agenda goes, that we believe that transparency and openness leads to better policy. And so while we are very much in sort of the messy middle of launching the early childhood agenda's next phase, to be able to sort of provide you all with updates while we are in that middle stage and not try to make everything sort of perfect. So believing in the culture of continuous improvement, finding different check-in points throughout the way to hear from you all on what's working, what's not working, what you would like to see more of, and to inform the design of the agenda that way. We also have been relying on the Elevating Voices Continuum, which you can see a little graphic to the right of the words here that shares a little bit about how our participants identify within that continuum. So I'm going to go to the next slide and then I'll go back to this one just so you can all see it. So the Elevating Voices Continuum is really meant to change the power balances that we often see in meetings. So to prioritize, not to prioritize one person's voice over another, but to ensure that when we are asking questions of an audience, when we are engaging on policy discussions, that we are creating space for those who have lived experience, for those who are working directly with children and families or have young children themselves, to provide feedback and to share their perspectives. So we ask all participants of the Early Childhood Agenda to identify themselves based on these three numbers. So number one, if you interact with children and families every day. Number two, if you interact with children and families occasionally. And number three, if you do not regularly interact with children and families, but you do have a vested interest. So if everyone on the 9:30 call could go ahead and just put the number that you identify with in the chat. We always think it's really interesting to see sort of who's in the room at the time, and get a gauge for everyone who is participating in the call. All right, leadership opportunities is another really key component of this, that through our advocacy network, through the Speakers Bureau, and now through the Early Childhood Agenda, wanting to make sure that we're creating a pipeline or a sort of ladder of opportunities for individuals who are working with children and families every day, but want to step into more of a leadership role, are interested in advocacy and policy, and they have a space to do that and an opportunity to do that within the agenda. Cross-sector collaboration is a key component of this, as I mentioned earlier. That was sort of our big lesson learned from the 9:30 call, that we wanted to make sure that various issue areas could learn from each other, could work together, could share updates. And we see that reflected in the 10 priorities of the Early Childhood Agenda, which cut across, early education and care, and food security, health, connecting sort of early childhood with healthcare professionals, developmental monitoring, screening, and various other issue areas. And then finally, structural support. So knowing that there are various things that we can do as an organization hosting these conversations that will either sort of prevent or support individuals to participate. So whether it's meeting times or providing feedback in an online forum. So we used GroupMap a lot throughout the fall, where we were able to pose questions and hear from the Early Childhood Agenda partners, and they were able to provide feedback sort of online whenever they could, wherever they could, if they weren't able to make it to direct meeting time. We've also been using Basecamp, which we're still figuring out a little bit of how to use that tool effectively, but provides a space for online discussion forums to save documents where folks can go in and look at the materials from the Early Childhood Agenda, recordings, posting recordings onto YouTube, which I'm sure this one will make it on to our page as well.
I just wanted to add that Neri put in the chat our library of recordings.
Awesome.
So that's there.
Thanks, Amy. And one of the final pieces that I'll mention is, so with the graphic on the right there, you'll see that the participants, we've had 37% of the participants in the Early Childhood Agenda so far identify as ones, 23% as twos, and 26% as threes. And then we also had 9% identify as having young children themselves. So this is one metric that we've been using to kind of gauge who's been involved in this initiative so far, and knowing that we want to keep the focus on the ones and twos to make sure that we are folding that into our sort of recruitment practices and how we're doing some community outreach to ensure that that number continues to grow. All right, so we've used this slide a few times on the 9:30 call. So the Early Childhood Agenda is three things primarily. It's a partnership, so it's a way to connect the early childhood community. It's a process, so it's a way to engage in a consensus building process about priorities and needs within the community. And then it's ultimately also a product. So we have this list of 10 priorities now that we can use for the next 2 years to work on together to sort of focus our attention and our our work moving forward. We've also been collecting information about our partners. So beyond that initial graphic, sort of what's our geographic representation across Massachusetts? And as you can see here, we sort of cover the entire span of the state, which we were really excited to see. And also knowing that there's clearly a overrepresentation in Boston. So wanting to continue to grow the partnerships out in Western Mass, out in Central Mass, in the North Shore, the South Shore, to make sure that we are fully inclusive of everyone in the Massachusetts state, and that we are pulling in all of those different perspectives to these conversations, because the needs are very different out in Western Mass than they are in Greater Boston, as an example. All right. So the final metric that I wanted to share with you all is from the survey that we released in the fall. So one of the sort of final steps of the early childhood agenda was to send out a survey to not only our partners, but sort of the broader community, and ask for responses on what are the issue areas that we should really focus on, that we should prioritize onto the final agenda product. And we saw responses from over 1,000 individuals. 65 of the individuals work with children and families every day, so they identified as a number one, which we were thrilled to see. More than half have a young child themselves, and we define that as under the age of 8. We saw statewide representation with over 50 individuals from each region of Massachusetts. And then finally, that the survey was released in 7 languages, and we developed these 10 priorities over the course of 4 months and 8 meetings. So it was this really intensive, sort of confined process where we moved through the challenges that everyone faces in early childhood every day. We have fantastic information in this large list of data from everyone who has participated on what those challenges were, and then narrowing that down to sort of some key ones that we wanted to focus on and prioritize, and then moving into solutions from there. So of these 10 challenges that are the most sort of important to the community, how do we then think about solutions, which is where the early childhood agenda sort of ended in January, and where we're hoping to kick it off now. So in the development of the agenda, we also identified 5 focus areas, and those were sort of the original working group conversations that we hosted throughout the fall. And these 5 areas are financially secure families, high quality experiences, the early childhood workforce, system infrastructure and local partnerships, and healthy beginnings. And what we really thought of here is that these are key components of an early childhood system, and we wanted to focus the conversations on different aspects of that early childhood system, so that, you know, we know that compensation, as an example, cuts across many of these different issue areas, but how do we say, you know, high quality experiences group, you all need to focus on this part of the work, and then we'll leave the conversation around compensations, the salary and benefits, to the early childhood workforce group. And then we'll see it all kind of come together in the end. And I mentioned the tools earlier, so sort of the various tools that we've used throughout the early childhood agenda process. And finally, this is the agenda that we released in January. You can see that there are 10 different priorities. Each one has an icon next to it that sort of shows the origin and which focus area that priority came from. So number 1 is an example. That priority was really developed by the groups that were focusing on financially secure families and the early childhood workforce. We also named lead advocates on some of the priorities. So on a priority, if there was an established alliance that was already working in that space, where organizations and individuals had come together, they've developed an advocacy agenda, there's momentum. We wanted to make sure that this was additive and not duplicative, that we were supporting that work and seeing our role now as being a point of connection. So for those who are interested in, you know, creating a children's cabinet and sort of state governance, or creating a common application, that we can refer them to the Child and Adolescent Health Initiative or the Common Application Coalition. As I mentioned, we celebrated our release in January at the State House, and I'll ask our team to put the link in the chat there, so that if anyone hasn't seen the video yet, they can go ahead and watch that video. And I also wanted to share that since January, we've had the opportunity to sort of be in the community and share a little bit about the early childhood agenda in a couple different spaces. So for Vital Village, we attended their Now Network, the Child Health Equity Summit out in Worcester, and then at Wheaton College in Massachusetts, where we were able to sort of share the early childhood agenda overview and then do a little bit of a deeper dive on one or two of those different priorities. And to get some responses and sort of kickstart the work that we expect to happen over the next few months. All right, so looking forward. So from August of 2021 through October of 2022 was really our planning phase as an organization, where we were developing internally what the early childhood agenda structure should look like. From October of 2022 through January of 2023 is what we've been calling the development phase, where we were meeting in these work groups, where we were focusing on those 5 different areas of early childhood, and our partners were able to identify, coordinate, and elevate 10 priorities for the agenda. Now we are in the implementation phase, where we really want to provide opportunities for partners to connect with those sort of established alliances, the coalitions, as well as what we're calling emerging alliances. So where we've identified on the agenda that this is a priority for the early childhood community, and at the same time, we don't have an alliance that's formed. We don't have a space where organizations can come together and can focus on this issues particularly, which is why we are going to be launching 7 new work groups through the early childhood agenda. And the work groups will focus on these different issue areas. So the first one is workforce compensation. And we wanted to make sure that this is focusing broadly on the early childhood workforce, so beyond early education and care, but thinking about the other professionals who work with young children who we may be able to partner with, or to think about sort of workforce compensation efforts in a little bit of a broader sense. Number 4, which focuses on developmental monitoring, screening, evaluation, and timely delivery of services. Number 5, which is really about a quality improvement infrastructure in the state, and how can we support high quality experiences for young children. Number 6 is about local infrastructure and partnerships. So really zeroing in on the local structures and what we need in our cities and towns. Number 8 focuses on developing a public education campaign. So really raising awareness about the importance of the early years and development. Number 9 is really strengthening those links between health and early childhood. And then number 10 is developing a comprehensive solution to early childhood hunger. So thinking more in the birth through age 8. I also wanted to mention that one of the key components of the early childhood agenda is this opt-in advocacy piece. So we wanted this to be designed as a true public-private partnership, which means that we are encouraging and reaching out to our many friends within state government, within the legislature, who are interested in each of these issue areas and want to partner with them, to invite them to these conversations, to have them participate in the early childhood agenda as partners, and to be able to opt out of the advocacy pieces of it. So as a partner, that also means that when you become a partner of the early childhood agenda, you're not taking a stance on all 10 priorities. You're not saying, I support all 10 of these by joining this convening. You're just participating in the process. We wanted to have this be as open of a door as possible, and to make sure that we can capture as many voices as possible. So what you can do is you can choose which campaigns to participate in and support advocacy that aligns with your individual priorities or interests. So next steps for the early childhood agenda. The big one is that we would ask you all to save the date for our next convening, which will be on June 28th. And we'll be sending out an email to our broader list that has some more information on that, like time and an invitation to register. So that's the big one. If you are not already, please sign up for the Early Childhood Agenda's email updates. That's our primary way of communicating with the group, but we do send out occasional updates to the 9:30 caller, to our broader list. Visit the website, so this is our sort of legacy website from the fall. We are in the messy middle of launching a new website, which should be coming in the next I'm going to say 4 to 5 weeks. And once that's up, we really hope that that will be a resource for you all to learn about the agenda and also to sort of see those pathways of engagement. And then if this last piece, I also wanted to share that for the work groups, we're really hoping to launch these throughout the summer. So our team is actively meeting with partners who are interested in sort of leading the work for each of these work groups and setting up those structures so that everything is ready to go. We will hopefully be launching the first one in the next few weeks and then sort of staggering those launches throughout the summer so that by the end of August, we have all 7 up and ready to go. And we'll make sure to communicate that with everyone who's interested so that you can sort of sign up for them as they come online. We then imagine that, you know, between September of 2023 and January of 2025, that there will be a set of checkpoints along the way that we, expect each work group to meet, but also a lot of flexibility because each issue area is very different and has different needs. So wanting to work collaboratively, work together to identify what some of those projects are that the work group might be focusing on and what they're ultimately working towards in January of 2025. I will pause there.
Thanks so much, Marissa. There was a question about what time on the 28th.
That is a great question. I'm not sure if there is a time set yet. Neri,
If we have figured out, right. We'll probably do a daytime one, record it, and then show it at night.
Yeah.
Or we'll do a night one too. So there'll probably be 2 dates at Magina. So the other context is kind of that group. We've been meeting with people. So some people have said, I want to help facilitation. Some people said we're content experts. So we will be reaching out to everybody that we've kind of connected with this week and next week, just to kind of share an update, see where we are. And then I think on the 28th, we'll share more about how folks can join in, where they want to be part of a work group. I think we have also thought a lot about, we had 5 work groups, we have 10 priorities, and now the next phase of the work, what language do we use? I think one thing we just want to signal is that all 10 of those priorities will continue. And other groups like the Common Start Coalition for agenda item number 2, they are really, that's the place to go. If you want to advocate for that, join the Common Start Coalition and their efforts. So the work will continue. The way that we're organizing it and figuring out how to match people up with opportunity is what we're really trying to figure out now, and want to think about what makes the most sense. We have been overwhelmed by people's interest and really excited about some of the interesting combinations of groups and folks that really want to take the lead on some of these items.
I will also add that we're still kind of organizing those lead roles. So sort of the leadership opportunities and where we can match up organizations or individuals who have either facilitation or content expertise with the work groups so that we can kind of get those structures launched. But in terms of partners, if you are interested in all or any of the work groups, those are going to be open. So similar to the early childhood agenda, this is a fully open, there is no wrong door. If you want to join all 7, you are welcome to do that. So we'll be sharing that information with everyone just to make sure that you know what that pathway for signing up is. But if any of those topics interest you, you are more than welcome to join. And then I also saw Brian's question about, is there anything that folks can do in the meantime while we're getting all of this up and running? And I know that Titus is working on some budget related advocacy that we're going to be sending out on our email communication platform. And that we'll be sending out over email, and that we would love for you all to take a look at that and to see again if there are all or any of those priorities that you're interested in advocating for, that you'll see that pathway there and that you can go ahead and send a note to the legislature about the fiscal year 24 budget.
I'll just add the one other thing we've learned is each of those kind of next step work groups is really kind of a single entity as far as strategy. So we discovered pretty early there's no one size fits all solution. There are different folks that are wanting to join. There are different, whether it's a policy priority, whether it's something that can happen in a community. So it's very individualized about what that looks like for kind of moving that agenda priority forward. So that's the other thing to think about is how they all work together, how they are unique and individual, and what support each of them needs to kind of keep going. So Marissa, thank you so much for the update. And if folks have questions, please, you can follow up with each of us, put it in chat, and we will get out information about the 28th, about the time. Everything will continue to be virtual. Although we have had some calls for like a 9:30 call dance party somewhere. So we'll be working on that as well in the middle of the state. Tomorrow we're gonna hear from one of our Advocacy Network participants. So tune in for that. Otherwise, Marissa, maybe just put your email in the chat quickly. So we can, if folks want to follow up. And there's no question is too minor. We're figuring this out. The strength of this has been the feedback and the continuous improvement, as Marissa mentioned. So please, if you're thinking about something, just let us know. We were really hoping to hear more from folks. Marissa, thank you so much. There's also lots of congratulations for you in the chat. And we will see, listen, Celtics, send some good vibes, and we will see everybody tomorrow.